Ohio's history when it comes to anime and video game conventions is filled with long-standing more popular events like Colossal Con or Matsuri Con or OhioCon before the firings and lawsuits and staff splitting and putting on separate events outside of Columbus. It's a really long story. To smaller events that aren't around anymore like Shinboku-Con or ANG or Midori-Con, although the latter has shown signs of life recently. And then there's the smaller 2-day or single-day events, like Final Boss Con in Rio Grande. Yes, it's spelled like Rio Grande, but it's pronounced Rio Grande. Or Animarathon at Bowling Green University. And then there's this. Little Tokyo at the Fairfield Commons in Beaver Creek, Ohio, a suburb near Dayton. For those outside of Ohio, it's basically 1 hour west of Columbus. And Columbus is right in the middle of the state. Lasting one day, it was put on by the people behind Glotaku, a party and entertainment group particularly known for its raves, and Izakaya, a restaurant and bar in the Fairfield Commons Mall. I wasn't planning to do anything con-related at all after the utter chaos that was WeebCon Indy, but this was a short drive away and a low-risk event overall, so why not? Once my wife got off work, we took her Miata-mobile down I-70 and before long, arrived at Fairfield Commons Mall. We'd been here a few times before, so we were somewhat familiar with the lay of the land. The event was mainly taking place at a building attached to the mall. This used to be a Dick's Sporting Goods, but on this day, it was being rented as an event space. We actually got confused because we stopped in front of the actual Dick's Sporting Goods first. It was at one side of the mall and recently switched to another anchor building. But we followed the people wearing badges and or cosplay to the other side of the mall. The signs inside the mall had not been updated to show where the new Dick's location was, so they more or less guided us where we needed to go. The Little Tokyo event was right next to the food court. Side note, this is the first time I've seen a mall food court this full since, well, the last con I attended that was next to / in a mall. We actually wanted to check out Izakaya itself, but unsurprisingly, it was booked solid with reservations and there was no space at the bar. Even without knowing the event space used to be a Dick's Sporting Goods, it's very obvious that's what used to be here. Not just because of the look of the building and some of the leftover decor, but also because of the repurposed mini-golf area. This was a 2-story Dick's location, but they weren't using the bottom floor at all. I don't know how much it would have cost to not just rent that space, but also supply power to it, but considering it's the first time this one-day event was put on, I'm guessing they weren't sure what attendance would be like and didn't want to overreach on their first try. Speaking of, attendance seemed decent. Better than Friday at WeebCon Indy at least. It was tough to estimate how many people were there because people would hang out in the event space for a bit, then wander the shops in and around the mall. The space itself had a total of 11 vendors and 21 artists. The layout was a bit wonky as some vendor and artist tables were right along where foot traffic would take everyone, while others were pulled back or in corners that could make them or their wares harder to see. There was a decent selection of art stuff, but no video games. Well, unless you count the few tables in one corner where a couple of consoles were set up. More on video games later. They had a panel room which it took me 2 laps of the space to notice because part of the banner for it came loose and fell over, and a main stage space for various other programming and a cosplay exhibition. There were a total of 4 panels and 5 stage events for the day, all of which were posted on the event's website, and half the panels were about VTubing. There was also a swap meet space which I had trouble noticing because it was set in the back in what used to be a break room or a fitting space or something. Guests can be tough to get for one-day events, particularly first-timers in or around less populated cities, but there were 3 at this event. A VTuber called Grimalkini and 2 voice actors, Kaylee McKee and Emily Bauer. There was also a car show of sorts, by which I mean there were 4-ish cars in the parking lot outside the front doors with various wraps and stuff inside them. I'm not a car guy, so a lot of this goes over my head. Also, they were just sitting in parking spots side by side with all the other regular cars, which was a choice. Lunchtime came around, and rather than deal with the food court, we walked outside and got some BJs. No, go ahead, I can wait. We took in some pizza and mac and cheese balls while watching hot dog eating and kickball on TV, and listening to the sound of an approaching thunderstorm whistling through the front doors. As it turned out, we and a couple other cosplayers left and returned to the mall just in time, because as I was about 40 feet from the doors leading back into the mall, a raindrop hit me in the face. I was wearing a baseball cap and not looking up, and it still hit me in the face. We were further away from the event space, but that was fine because there were other shops in this mall the attendees were gravitating toward. The mall has a Zoomies, a Hot Topic, a Spencer's, and various other stores that stocked anime or game-themed stuff. On the upper floor is an anime shop called Nani. Next to that is an FYE and a Suncoast, and almost directly below them is a Pokemon store called Original 151. Unfortunately, the escalator to easily get between them was out of order. Because of course it was. Despite the name, they do have stuff for pretty much every generation of Pokemon. Not that I would know, I struggled to name anything that came after Red, Blue, and Yellow. I was able to resist the Pokemon figures posing with fingerboards, but I did end up going home with one of my mains from Red and Blue, Ammonite. This store is planning to expand into 2 adjacent store spaces because they have so much Poke crap but no places to put all of it. The weebs are well and truly taking over. Also near Nani and Original 151 is Round 1. Think Dave & Buster's, but there's also bowling. The game space at this particular Round 1 has a crap ton of UFO catchers, many of which have otaku bait in them, and a section that seems to tick many of the boxes for the average con's arcade gaming space. Sound Voltex, DDR, Initial D, Pump It Up, Taiko Drum Master, Mario Kart, the obligatory row of fighting game cabs, as well as stuff like a Power Pros setup, House of the Dead, Cruisin' Blast, and a couple Castlevania Marble of Souls pusher machines. Alucard does not look interested in this. We had to leave before the after-party/rave, which was technically a separate event and a separate charge, and by then the rain had stopped. Until we wound up driving back through the rest of it. I want to see events like this succeed and grow, so here's some advice for the Little Tokyo staff if/when they decide to try this again. First off, better signage. Whether it's temporary floor graphics or a couple signs on easels, have something closer to where the attendees walk to help guide them to places they could easily miss, like the panel room, the swap meet, or the car show. Barring that, have an easily accessible floor layout people can pull up on a phone or something, either from a mobile version of the event site or a separate app. 2. Dedicated Itasha car show space. Again, you're working with what you have, but if the idea is to show off these decked out and modded cars, then they need to have the proper dedicated space to do that. After all, it's hard to look at and photograph these things if they're all in parking spaces a foot and change apart among other people's regular everyday cars. If this stays outside, rope off some space for them and maybe, I'm just thinking of this right now, have preferential parking for other people who mod or glam up their cars but don't quite go the full Itasha car wrap lengths with them. And no, I'm not just saying this so my wife can park closer. 3, and this would be the hardest one to make work, find extra space. At the very least, enough for extra panel hosting. I don't know if the repurposed Dick's building is plausible for future events or if this was a right place, right time sort of thing, but this is one of the few times I've seen an event with more main stage programming than panel programming. And 4, expand the game section. By that, I don't just mean add more games or consoles or even arcade cabs. Many attendees wound up over at Round 1. I don't know if it would be possible at all to incorporate them into the event in some way, but it's at least something worth exploring. And as an aside, since there's also the Pokemon store and the anime store in the mall, maybe work out a promotional deal with them. Show your badge, get 5% off, or something like that. At the event itself, you could keep what you have, but add one TV and a console setup to host a tournament or two. Maybe get that hooked up to a projector, throw it up on the wall for everyone to see. I've helped with a few tournaments over the years, including one where the entrants knew they would be playing a fighting game, but they didn't know what fighting game. How about a mystery racing game tournament where the game changes each round, or a fighting game tournament where the players need to play using rock band drums? Hell, shoot me a DM, I'll help make that happen. And I'm just now realizing I did not write a proper ending to this video.